Hello again. This is our third section of right plant, right place, and we're looking at those plants that can tolerate reduced light, in other words, shady situations. Now there is obviously a spread of shady situations. Some will be dry shade and some will be moist shade, so you have to match accordingly. But finding plants that are adapted to shady conditions mean they survive in them, that you won't put plants in that are doomed to fail because they need high levels of light. So plants that are adapted for reduced light have a few strategies up their sleeves. The main one is called the bluebell effect. I'm sure you'll be aware at this time of year all that's left of a bluebell is basically seed pods if they've managed to set seed. So the bluebell effect means, you see these little bits of foliage, means that once the plant has leapt into action and flowered early in the season, making the most of the light that's coming in through a deciduous canopy, they do a very early life cycle. They flower, pollinate, get pollinated, set seed, and end their life cycle for that season, mission accomplished, seed set, and die down before the light levels in that woodland situation are reduced by a full canopy like I'm standing here. So that's called the bluebell effect. So Hyacinthoides non-scripta, the bluebell, is well adapted to shady conditions by the nature of it. So you will find lots of the bulbous species that flower in the spring will suit a shady condition. The other plants in that group are also plants that do their sort of life cycle early. In other words, they leap into action early and flower early, such as the pulmonarias. We've looked at Pulmonaria Sissinghurst White, which has lovely mottled leaves. This is actually Pulmonaria rubra. The seed heads have completely finished flowering and the seed is actually set inside there. I can see little brown seeds. So it has done its whole life cycle early. And now for the rest of its season, those leaves just sort of tick along, nice bit of ground cover, and can survive in those shady situations. But it's done its life cycle early in the season, making the most of the light that it gets under those deciduous canopies. Another plant that does that is the hellebore. This is Helleborus crosshybridus. We learned of one called tutu, and this is the seed head of tutu. So again, another plant that does really early life cycle. All those seeds have come out. It actually makes a really good cut flower as a dried flower once it's at that point. But hellebore has something else up its sleeve for shady conditions. It's actually evergreen. It has an evergreen leaf, quite a dark green leaf, so it's got a lot of chlorophyll in there, an evergreen, so it can it's like a tongue twister. It can photosynthesize all year. So even as it comes really shady, midsummer, full canopy, it's ticking along nicely, dark glossy green leaves, photosynthesizing, but it has all of the spring, all of the winter months when the canopy has gone and it's getting light in there. So many of our evergreens can cope with good levels of shade. What about the periwinkles? We class them as sort of evergreen shrubs, although they really look like a herbaceous perennial. But this is Vinca major alba, beautiful white flowers that really show up well in a shady condition. It's ground cover. A lot of those plants that ground cover and creep around can cope with shady conditions. They creep into shady conditions and can cope. So evergreen leaves, nice and glossy, dark green, really good to photosynthesize all year round, coping with those low light levels. If you're thinking of shady areas, look to nature. If you walk through a woodland, think of those evergreen plants that you see that can cope under the canopy. On my list, the camera person can get there, I've included Ilex aquifolium. Think of the hollies that are just managing to cope understory. We've also got our native hazel. It's an understory plant in a woodland situation, so you can use that to your advantage. And when you're walking about in natural woodlands, what about the ivies that go up tree trunks and creep along the ground? They have adapted for shady conditions by their nature. They can cope with the shade. And obviously ferns. There's a vast range of ferns that we can use in the garden situation that can cope with shady conditions. So the point of the whole of these sections is gardening sustainably, is making the most of plant knowledge, using the plants in the right place, It saves you money, you don't lose plants due to them dying because they're unhappy, but equally you don't have to water plants. If you've planted the ones that can cope with the dry area, those don't die of overwatering. If you've planted them in a boggy area, match them up, and gardening is easier and successful and your plants are happy. So think about those adaptations and match the right plant to the right place.